2018, and that we were prepared to take necessary steps to prevent it from happening. We talked about it in a variety of ways in the area of cyber and information technology exchanges, which we had stopped between the United States and Russia earlier this year.
National Security Advisor John Bolton on his warning to Russia about election interference, as the New York Times reports that U.S. intelligence sources in Moscow have gone mysteriously silent ahead of the November midterms, leaving the CIA and other intel agencies largely in the dark about Moscow's plans to interfere. James Carafano is Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation. So, James, are we unaware exactly of what Russia is up to? Several questions for you. How are they going to interfere in the midterm elections, or are we ill-prepared to combat it? And then tell us, how vulnerable are the U.S. election systems, and how much damage could Russia do?
Right. Well, the first thing we know is absence of evidence is not evidence. So because we read something in the New York Times, we don't necessarily know if it portrays the full scope of knowledge of intelligence operations that the U.S. is undertaking, because theoretically those are classified. And even if there is a lack of reporting out of Moscow, that doesn't necessarily tell you much either. There could be a whole spectrum of reasons for that. So
what's your perspective then from the Heritage Foundation? What's your perspective?
Well, so here's what we do know, right? This isn't our first trip to the rodeo. We have seen a lot of Russian activity over the last years, and people have really gone to school on it. The American intelligence community has gone to school on it. Private sector is going to go to school on it. We at Heritage, we get hit every day. We have awareness of this, and so there's a lot of knowledge about what the Russians can and have done in the past, and a lot of people looking out for that. So it's not 2016. This isn't a replay of what happened last time.
So you're saying not much damage as compared to 2016?
Well, we don't know what we don't know. I mean, here's what we do know, is we know a lot of what the Russians have done in the past, and a lot of what they do. And there's a lot of people looking at that and how to respond to that. The other thing is, again, we don't know the spectrum of intelligence activities. And I think part of the problem I have with people is they often focus on these things as like their electrons versus our electrons. And there's just some guy with a little electronic shield,
so you don't seem to be very concerned.
Well, the thing is there's a lot of things that we can do to the Russians non-electronically, which can get their attention and behavior. And so there's a lot of people like
if you're talking about sanctions, it's getting their attention. It's not hurting their economy short term. Maybe long-term effects could be provide some damage to the Russian economy. But right now, they're continuing to move on.
Well, for example, if you're an individual, though, and you're related to somebody else and they have control of this, and you have an apartment in London, and all of a sudden that apartment could poof and disappear, that has an impact on you. So you have to look at the spectrum of the competition, not just how many hits have we had by the Russians today.
Let's move on. You've heard National Security Advisor John Bolton being tough on Russia and to the point with messaging to Moscow. How important is the president's voice and position on this? I mean, he won't unequivocally say that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election. Could be Russia, could be anyone.
Well, look, the Russians have gotten the message. I mean, you had reporting on earlier that the Russians are upping their naval activity. Well, why are they doing that? Because they're demonstrating.
But you're not answering my question.
But they're not happy with us because we've been tough on the Russians, and the Russians know that. And they, unlike a lot of people, pay more attention to just what the president tweets and said. They look at the totality of American policy. American policy has been very, very tough on that. They try to push back in ways they can. And they know that if they do try to do something that's new and different and dangerous in the elections, that they'll pay a big price for that.
Without jeopardy.